Welcome back. Tastes just like chicken.
If you're looking for answers, then issue 12 is for you. We've already talked about Alsimmons' death at the hands of Chapel, but in universe, this is where it all starts to come together for Spawn. Spawn is starting to get some more of his memories back. He remembers his wedding and remembers that they wanted to have children together, but Al couldn't have kids. Now Wonder has moved on and married Al's best friend, Terry Fitzgerald, and they have a child together called Cyan. Later, after having drinks with his homeless friends, one of them tries on Spawn's mask with almost fatal results, but Spawn suddenly remembers his killer. All the pieces fall in place. It was Chapel. Now Chapel has quite a few ties to Alsimmons. Before killing him, they took part in the Operation Night Strike mission together, and even had the same boss, Jason Wynn. So they're both countrymen, loyal to their job, and they were really good at killing people. If Al hadn't been murdered, the character that Chapel becomes could easily have been Al. Chapel was injected with chemicals to give him superhuman abilities, but was also injected with HIV that could be activated by his superiors if he didn't behave. Chapel is also a member of the Youngbloods, a team often likened to the Avengers or Justice League, which have their own comic, created by Robliefeld, which is where he was normally found. Now remember, Chapel being Spawn's killer is the original continuity before the '97 live action film changed things, and we have more murky ownership waters to cross to explain this change. Now because Chapel was created and therefore owned by Rob Liefeld, when Rob was fired from imagecomics in 1996, the rights to use Chapel went with him. He obviously was not prepared to give consent to the use of Chapel in the '97 Spawn movie, so Jessicapriest was created as a proxy, and since comic issue 61, she is now regarded as Alsimmons' true murderer. The flashback arc continues into issue 13, where Spawn breaks into the Youngbloods' base and abducts Chapel by teleporting them both to a swamp. They begin to fight as Spawn explains to Chapel who he is and that he is there to take revenge for his own murder. Turns out Al was murdered by Chapel with his trusty laser pack at close range, which fried his brains to a crisp. Chapel eventually accepts that he's fighting Alsimmons, who's back from the dead.
No, you can't be alive. I'm not, asshole.
Finally, Spawn defeats Chapel, but instead of killing him, Spawn uses his powers to permanently scar his adversary. Spawn removes Chapel's face in the shape of his skull war paint, his bare white skull dripping with blood as a reminder of the murderous mercenary he is. The Myths arc is a fun side story where Clown recites his time on Earth over 800 years ago, plotting and scheming against the then current Spawn, who looks an awful lot like the medieval Spawn of issue 9. They fight, and it's what you'd expect really, but Clown claims that he was the first dragon ever, even if the legends don't capture his image properly. The Reflections arc opens with Jason Wynn introducing us to his current project, Simmonsville, where there's something just not quite right. Turns out 5 years ago, an A-bomb test opened a hole, a portal to Hell. They found out that Hell is made up of psychoplasm, which is a substance that changes in response to your thoughts. It is said that psychoplasm becomes whatever you desire or fear, and this Wynn wants to weaponize. He explains that Simmonsville is a conjuring of Alsimmons' memories that were stolen by Hell and made real by the psychoplasm. Spawn digs up his body, but if his body is in the coffin, the question remains, who is he now? Whose body is he inhabiting, if not his former one? Well, it turns out it's just made of psychoplasm. Feels like a bit of a missed opportunity, but Meanwhile, angels are preparing to create their own soldier to combat the new Hellspawn threat, but they need a human vessel to bear the elemental fire. This involves beaming the Chosen One up to a space station that they have commandeered. Who is the human they choose? Who would be the best person to go head to head against Alsimmons? With Chapel out of the equation, his old boss Jason Wynn of course, and so Wynn is turned into the anti-spawn. Anti-spawn, as he is known at this time, or Redeemer as he becomes known later on, is one of the best villains in the whole Spawn Rogues gallery. He is the other side of the same coin as Spawn, the heaven to his hell. Even their costumes are a twisted mockery of each other, with Redeemer having a purple cape, a dark grey costume with white accents, golden spikes and chains all over. As for powers, he pretty much has all the same powers as Spawn, so feel free to think of him as a Mortal Kombat palette swap ninja perhaps, similar but different enough. Wynn may be the first Redeemer, but he isn't the last. It turns out he was a bad choice to host the elemental fire, which is heaven's equivalent to hell's necroplasm. Wynn has a bad time as the elemental fire rejects him due to his evil soul, which causes him maddening agony the whole time he wears the Redeemer persona. Spawn finds himself in Simmonsville and has been attacked by anti-spawn. It looks like he's going to lose as he's been outclassed in every way. He decides to teleport out of there to regroup and figure out a plan to defeat his new adversary. He teleports into the alleyways he knows so well, but is instantly attacked again by the anti-spawn, as he can track and teleport after Spawn. There's no escape. Al's symbiotic suit is in agony, and he's fading in and out of consciousness while the enemy speaks of his head being filled with light and not being able to think straight. It doesn't seem like Wynn is having a good time either. He seems to think that the angels will let him rest if he kills Spawn, and he renews his fighting efforts. The anti-spawn stands triumphant over the defeated Spawn, but the homeless inhabitants of the alleys come to Spawn's rescue, distracting his rival long enough for Spawn to gather himself for one last fight. Anti-Spawn is surprised by this, but continues the fight. After stabbing him with an energy sword, he seems to run out of energy and becomes fatigued, giving Spawn enough time for a counterattack. Spawn uses a huge amount of energy himself to fell his rival, and with his defeat, Anti-Spawn is teleported back to the Angel space station. Spawn goes back to Simmonsville and loads up on guns, and destroys the entire place, literally watching his life go up in flames, again. He destroys everything except for a memory of the day he proposed to Wanda. He uses his power to condense the memory, and once back home he releases it, gifting it to Wanda. The Showtime arc is where Spawn meets Harry Houdini. Sorry, but I'm not a fan of this particular arc. Houdini is there to teach Spawn about his magic abilities. There's something to do with a magic realm called the Overlap, and some demons, monsters, things, who want to test if an atomic bomb can kill a demon. They also want to kill Houdini in the blast because he's a pest, yet he works for them, so I have no idea. I told you I really don't like this one. Did I mention Spawn wears his best costume yet? A chauffeur outfit. Boo! Spawn gets invited to a show at the Magicians Club by Houdini and drives a flying Rolls Royce. While at the lecturer holds the whole crowd to ransom. A shot is fired and the lecturer presses the arm button, setting the timer to count down. He tries to stop it, but the device is broken and continues counting down. Houdini is pleased with himself, mission accomplished, until he realizes he's been double-crossed by the monster demon things. Houdini then traps the atomic blast between realms and transports it elsewhere, that elsewhere being the Overlap. The inhabitants of the Overlap turn out to be called Overlappers, which
I suddenly feel so dirty.
Spawn thinks that Houdini is vaporized containing the blast, but to the readers he is shown to have teleported back in time to 1916. The hunt arc starts with Spawn getting his face stitched up with a shoelace after a nasty fight with Batman. Sam and Twitch are searching the alleyways looking for Spawn, even resorting to the use of police brutality on a drug dealer. A mafia don called Vito Gravino, aka Vito Graves, aka Dracula, wants to get at Spawn. Turns out it's just Tony Twist, who is still upset about Overkill being destroyed and his men being slaughtered. Twist is feeling the pressure. Terry, Wanda's husband, is being threatened. Sam and Twitch are finally getting some leads on the elusive presence in the alleyways, and Overkill is being remade. Later, while Terry is being chased through the alleyways by Overkill, Sam and Twitch corner Spawn. While he worries about his friend, a homeless woman turns up, telling Al that Overkill is back and that he's attacking Terry. This is the distraction he needs, and he bolts off to save his friend. Spawn snatches Terry out of the hands of Overkill just in time, and the fight ensues. It goes badly for Spawn as he's armed only with a 2x4. While they fight, the detectives catch up and decide to help Spawn after all. And with one well-aimed shot, Twitch puts a slug in Overkill's ear, scrambling his directives. As Overkill wanders off in search of Badrock of the Youngbloods, everyone is left in the alleyway, relieved or unconscious. In the final issue within the Hunt arc, Sam and Twitch reveal Spawn's face while trying to find vital signs and are shocked at what lies under the mask. A homeless person refers to Spawn as Al, which raises questions for Terry. Unfortunately, the detectives hear him and start questioning him until he eventually makes his getaway, but they catch up with him shortly after. The homeless start throwing refuse at Terry's captors as they try and protect Spawn, while a couple of CIA agents try and run down anyone in their way between themselves and their target, Terry. Spawn blocks the car, totaling it in the process, and saves his old friend. Police, the mob, CIA, and camera crews turn up in response to the commotion, and while it goes against Al's instincts, he decides the time is right to come out of the shadows and make himself known. He writes a message on the alley wall in hellfire for everyone to see. These alleys belong to Spawn, before he disappears into the shadows once again. Before the issue ends, Spawn has some loose threads to tie up. He confronts Jason Wynn in his office, warning him to keep away from Terry and his family. He visits Sam at his home and tells him to contact the chief of police and to drop the Fitzgerald case and stay out of the alleyways. He finds Twist in the sauna and advises him to leave Terry alone and tells him that he is the one they want. Finally, he watches from a distance as his best friend and wife rest after one of the worst days of their life comes to an end. Sorrowful, he wishes that his existence wouldn't be a pain on them and that things would change for the better. Tremors. In this arc, we learn that Spawn's media stunt might have backfired, as it captures the attention of a monster who thinks he has the right to claim the alleyways as his own turf. This is Tremor, originally known as Richard Masulo. He is a mafia super soldier gone wrong who is super strong, tough, has cybernetic enhancements, healing factor, and a lust for revenge against Tony Twist. Tony is the one who did this to him, and because he retained his free will, his family were whacked. He looks demonic, but is more of a mutant or failed experiment in reality. And no, I'm not aware of any lawsuits from anyone named Richard Masulo, but watch this space, you never know. Spawn takes up Tremor's challenge for the rule of the alleyway and battles him, quickly besting him. They soon realise that they both want to bring Twist down for similar reasons, and instead of fighting over territory, Spawn decides to help the tragic monster. Spawn gives Tremor a file that he'd kept on old Tony's dealings. Tremor leaps into the night, happy in this knowledge that he can destroy his mortal enemy with these documents without even laying a finger on him. We start this issue with Fred, an old man who is borderline destitute, fighting with the courts to keep his daughter. Spawn is moping in the alleyways when he is revisited by an old friend, Cog, who now refers to himself as the Count. He is now legally distinct from his past self, you could say, wink wink. He exposition dumps everything, and Armageddon is mentioned, the final clash between heaven and hell, as Cog puts it. A homeless man bursts in with a friend and asks Spawn to help Fred from earlier, but Spawn sends him away unwilling to help. He says to Cog that they look to him for help all the time as a false sense of security, but Cog points out that he is actually more of a symbol of hope for them. All of a sudden, Spawn is teleported out of the alley to some kind of paradise. Gabrielle, unsurprisingly an angel, asks Spawn to join her at a table to talk. They are apparently outside of time as it's usually perceived, and in a dimensional umbrella. She shows Spawn a picture of Angela and asks him questions about the lance she is holding. After answering truthfully, Gabrielle's cryptic response indicates that Angela might have gone rogue. Gabrielle sends Spawn back to Cog, who hints that there's something more to him and his past, saying he's been through many wars, and they beat him. He's looking for someone who could stand against them and win. Later things are jovial, and Spawn is regaling down and outs with stories that happened in the spin-off comic book Violator, when he is told that Fred has committed suicide. Spawn is mortified and leaves to consider his next actions. Spawn talks with the homeless people about the violence that has been occurring. Spawn decides to try and resurrect Bobby, who was one of the homeless people that was killed. It works, but at a great expense of energy, yet Spawn feels that it was worth it as he's gained some respect back that he lost from some friends. The piece is quickly shattered as Spawn is shot in the back by a new villain called the Curse. Philip Crane, aka the Curse, is a religious fanatic hell-bent on killing Spawn and proving his worth to heaven. He wears black and green high-tech armour and has cybernetic enhancements, with one of his arms being replaced by an energy cannon. With a huge hole in his chest, Spawn appears defeated. The Curse walks away and starts preaching in alleyways, reciting his story to any who will listen. When he was a boy, he believed he needed to make a sacrifice for God to notice him, so he put out his eye and scarred his face. When he continued to be ignored, he chopped off one of his arms. It turns out that all you need is faith, a little sacrifice and a degree in business to make a difference. He earned good money through the businesses he started and made enough to build himself a more robust arm.
Praise the Lord.
While the Curse is in mid-flow to his congregation, his gun arm is blasted to pieces. Spawn is back and he is not happy. But in hand-to-hand combat, Spawn is bested and the Curse raises his hand. See what I did there? In triumph. Spawn attacks him with the faithful street dwellers trying to protect him. The issue ends with bodies flying everywhere and Spawn's hand around Curse's throat. We continue on from the last issue with the Curse defeated and pinned to the wall with a huge pipe through one arm and wires from his augmented arm tied to another. It's an amazing image. It somewhat echoes how Kincaid was left in issue 5. The Curse is not dead, but his faith has been broken. He vows to get revenge on Spawn. While all this is going on between Spawn and the Curse, Wanda and Terry are trying to find out how Spawn knew Terry's name and who Spawn actually is. Wanda starts asking the vagrants in the streets for information. She's about to give up when a bribe in the right hand sends her closer to finding him, or so she thinks. Unfortunately, all she finds is the Curse, who's still incapacitated, and some punks who are up to no good. She is in danger, but from the shadows various projectiles rain down until only one punk is left. He holds Wanda hostage, but is cast down quickly. Spawn has no idea who he just saved. Her name escapes his lips before he knew what he was saying. Finally, they meet face to face, his true form showing. She tells Spawn what has been happening and thanks him for saving Terry, but admits that Spawn scares her now. She gives him a photo frame of her family and promises him she will never come back to the alleys again. Spawn sits upon his refuse throne, surrounded by his fallen enemies, while staring at the photo. It may seem a little jarring to readers of the main series only, as this issue starts right after the Angela miniseries ends. Spawn is covered in blood, his cape in tatters, and far from the alleyways he knows. As he's on the brink of death, he is found by a young boy who befriends him. Spawn passes out and the child decides to take Spawn home to see if someone can help him. On the way home, he sees that the child has deep scarring on his back made by repeated beatings of straps or belts. Meanwhile, Wanda admits to Terry that she has met Spawn, but before they can talk further, Cyan bursts in. In a wonderful juxtaposition, Terry holds Cyan aloft while playfully chastising her, while a policeman holds and berates his child who helped Spawn. The boy's older brother tries to protect him, but they both get a beating. While the boy's father, the police officer, is passed out, the younger boy, Andy, takes his brother Eddie outside to meet Spawn. He sees their bruises and asks if their father did it. They lie and say it was just a bad football tackle and that he would never touch them, but it sounds like words have just been practiced and recited and raise a suspicion for Spawn. While they are outside, their father wakes and shouts them to get inside. Sam and Twitch look at the file that Spawn gave them earlier and connect Billy Kincaid with the chief of police. The next day, the boys and their father go to church and it seems like he's the cornerstone of the town, a good Christian police officer. Later, behind closed doors, he becomes unhinged and puts a gun to Andy's head for dropping a beer bottle. Again, Eddie comes to his rescue only to get another beating. Spawn overhears the commotion and bursts in, but their father has already left for the pub. Even in his weakened state, Spawn wants to teach this bully a lesson, but the boys beg him not to. They think it will only make things worse. Later, Spawn finds their father and gives him a verbal dressing down. He obviously respects Andy and Eddie's feelings, and instead of beating up their father, he uses his magic to temporarily cover him in a single phrase: "I beat my kids." The kids come home from school to their favourite things being destroyed, and their father on their bed, drunk, with his shirt off exposing Spawn's handiwork. He flies into a rage, grabbing Andy and starts choking him. Eddie runs away, unable to help, until he sees his father's gun. He goes back to his bedroom, their father towering over his little brother, and demands him to leave them alone. His father comes after him with the final word in big, bold, blood-red text is Blam. Well, that last one was heavy, it can't get any worse. Oh. It's the KKK. I don't need to tell you who they are or why they're bad, but in the Spawn universe, here in issue 30, they're about to feel the wrath of our favourite Hellspawn. After the last issue, Spawn has been wandering, trying to get home to his alleyways, the pedestrian way, to reserve his energy from teleporting. As he walks, he sees clan members in white robes and pointed hats, driving at speed, welding flaming torches. Further up the road, Spawn hears a scream and the night sky brightens. As he gets closer, he sees a family trying to stop a massive fire from spreading and engulfing their home. As he reaches them, the husband, Mr. Armstrong, points a gun at Spawn, thinking he's part of it. Spawn explains that he's also been the victim of systemic racism and shows his true face, explaining that this could happen to them too, and not just their property. The next night, Spawn attacks the clansman, but in a split second, while he thought he'd won, one of them puts a bullet through his head. While Spawn is down, they try and unmask him, but are unsuccessful. The leader demands that they fetch the chain and finish this properly. And the next page shows Spawn hanging limply from a gnarled old tree, his cape in tatters, flying weakly in the breeze. The next morning, Mr. Armstrong sees Spawn hanging, but before he can do anything to help, he is jumped by a couple of clansmen. Before they find themselves beaten unconscious, Spawn has now vanished. Mr. Armstrong is in court trying to find justice against the men who beat him up, but the judge is disinterested. It turns out that he is actually the man leading the clan. With the judge's back against the wall, the gloves are off. Now he's ready to cross the line between scare tactics and outright murder. After healing, Spawn starts getting revenge on the clansmen one by one. He takes away the things that bring them joy, their much-loved possessions, and finally challenges the judge himself. It starts one-on-one, but the judge has never known what it's like to play fair. He calls for his boys to come and help him out when things get tough. Spawn quickly outmaneuvers the old clansman and pins him against the ground. While he's lecturing the leader, his rabble arrive. The judge breaks into a big old smile, but I can only imagine the size of the smile Spawn is hiding under his mask. With a flash of green light, he disappears and the judge becomes a changed man. As his friends burst into the house, instead of seeing the judge as they know him, they see a black man in the leader's robes. They decide to teach him a lesson, and you are left with the image of shoe soles several foot from the floor. The imaginary clink of chain links shifting uncomfortably against themselves and the bark of a tree. Spawn is back. The king is finally home. It's been 3 weeks since he has teleported away from Angela in the miniseries, but the homeless who Al protects have not forgotten him. We are introduced to Raphael, Gabrielle's replacement, who is more cutthroat than her predecessor and is unwilling to fall from grace quite the same. The angels are searching for Spawn, and she is made aware that there are 3 signals that are potentials, 2 weak and 1 strong. They speak of choosing a new vessel for the antispawn suit and confirm that Wynn has been decommissioned. Back in the alleys, the curse is gone, no longer stapled to the wall in Spawn's throne room, and Spawn has been told that there's a rift between the homeless occupants. Some believe that it's quieter since Spawn left and are willing to drive him out, whereas others believe him to be their protector and that they owe him for the miracles he's performed for them. They all talk about Spawn's symbiote and how it looks weak. He's lost much of his cape while escaping heaven, but Spawn says it's acting weird and more aggressively. Foreshadowing. Next we see a young man working in the soup kitchen. His name is Phil Timper. He is a reformed felon who found God while he was in prison, and is now the model citizen. This makes him an ideal candidate for the Angels and their most elite warrior. He is teleported into the Angel space station, where he is analysed and confirmed as the perfect candidate to become the new Redeemer. Spawn is patrolling the alleyways, making sure his subjects are safe, but his suit warns him of danger. It leads to another alleyway, where the new Redeemer is standing tall over a cowering form of Bobby, the man who Spawn resurrected from the dead previously. This Redeemer looks almost identical to the last one. He just dropped the silly anti-spawn logo on his belt buckle, replacing it for a classy golden cross instead. It seems like the goal is to make an experiment out of poor old Bobby, as he is being beamed up, somewhat painfully, by Redeemer to the space station. Spawn tries to protect his friend, but all his efforts are futile, and he is beaten with ease. Spawn makes one final ditch effort to get Bobby out, but Redeemer sends a huge energy blast through Spawn's stomach, and with this, Redeemer and Bobby are teleported away. The inhabitants of the alleys come running to Spawn when the initial danger is gone. Suddenly, his costume lashes out, unable to tell the difference between friend and foe. It seems that the suit is in defense mode. The homeless run, and Spawn is left on his own. As he recoups his strength, the suit begins to move, to grow, to breathe. The costume lives, and with it comes change. The angel Raphael is met with the upper management of heaven. Most importantly, a kindly old woman who requests that Raphael refers to her as her own mother's name, Mary. While they talk, Spawn has been scaling outside of the building, and at this time bursts through the glass window like all hell's broken loose. The change to his appearance is apparent instantly. He looks bigger, stronger, there's more anger in his eyes. His costume has lost the red around the ribs, but he now has his iconic heavy, spiky boots, and the big red spiky gauntlet on his right arm. Even his cape is transformed, now being more than just rags, although it's far from back to normal. Basically, this is the big, red and spiky Spawn I love. This is my Spawn. Enough swooning. Spawn has attempted to surprise the angels on their own turf. He just didn't realise or didn't care that this was a neutral zone, an agreed safe space from conflict. Quickly, Spawn is surrounded by angel warriors, and he is cornered. His last remaining option is to take Mary hostage to try and bargain for Bobby. The angels back away until only Spawn, Mary and Raphael remain. Raphael tells Spawn that his friends are not with them. Eventually, after some persuading, she calls the orbital station to return Bobby. He is shown to be in pain with tubes and wires connecting him to monitoring equipment, but eventually Bobby is returned, unfortunately with the new Redeemer in tow. The Redeemer springs to attack, but Spawn's new costume is angry, aggressive, and ready to claim revenge on the being that hurt it. It's feral and still can't determine who is friend and who is foe, and with that it attacks wildly. Spawn tells Bobby to lead Mary to safety, but she stands calmly, while Spawn and the Redeemer fight viciously. Spawn becomes aware of her and turns his back on his nemesis. He apologises to her for what he did, but while they talk, his costume becomes lifeless again, giving Redeemer the opening he needs to blast Spawn with an energy beam. Spawn is outnumbered as the warrior angels join the fight, and he can see the tables turning against him. He grabs Bobby and teleports them to safety. Cog is there when they land back in the alleys, and tells Bobby that was God that Spawn was fighting, much to his surprise. The angels squabble about whose fault it all was, and Mary, who was God all along, made the point that the security system was built to protect against those who are truly evil, meaning that if Al was able to get through the system, then he obviously wasn't truly evil. She goes on to tell them that she allowed Al to take her hostage because he was doing a selfless act to save his friend, and not just an attack of wanton destruction. She concludes that he is destined to be the one. And with that, the issue ends. It's been a real pleasure to go back through all the early issues of Spawn. The art is more beautiful than I remember, the story more profound, especially towards the end. Yes, it is edgy and a product of its time, so that is something to bear in mind if you fancy experiencing it for yourself, but what Spawn has in spades is heart. It is a true labour of love from all the people who poured their hard work into every panel, every line, every story beat. Spawn is not only violent and grotesque, it is horror and action, it is superheroes and monsters, but it also has wonderful character-driven moments. The human moments are what elevate it from just another of those testosterone-driven macho comics, and it's what makes Spawn, or more specifically Alsimmons, so endearing and enduring as he is today. feel that Spawn has had a lasting impact on me from the moment I first saw the comic book cover all those years ago. If you had to pick a comic that had an impact on you, what would it be? I find it fascinating to talk about this kind of thing with people, so please feel free to drop a comment with your thoughts. As of this recording, Spawn has broken multiple records recently. Firstly, the record for longest running, creator-owned superhero comic book series ever at 301 issues. Now I think most people who have been following Spawn over the past couple of years know this one, but you might not know that The Scorched, one of the 4 ongoing titles, sold over 270,000 of its first issue, setting a new record for the best-selling new team comic book series in the past 30 years. The Scorched is a team made up of past and present Spawn. As well as these 2 colossal achievements, Spawn has broken 4 records within 6 months, which is the most records set by a single comic book franchise within that time frame. Other records broken are Spawn Universe Issue 1 sold over 200,000 copies, which is imagecomics' best-selling issue of the 21st century. King Spawn Issue 1 sold 497,000 copies, becoming the highest ordered superhero title from any publisher in the 21st century. Gunslinger Spawn Issue 1 sold 385,000 copies to become the best-selling monthly superhero comic book series launched in the past 25 years. Now is the best time to head to your friendly local comic book shop and check out what's going on with this Dark Avenger. If you're getting sick of the light and fluffy stuff being released by the big 2, or the Dark Knight isn't dark enough for you, look no further. If you're looking to check out Spawn, I would highly recommend any of the collected editions, or just pick up the latest issue and take it from there. You really can't go wrong. Now Mr. Poison, I hear you ask. I've had a great time learning about Spawn, but what does this have to do with your unpainted miniature collection? Well, I'm glad you asked. I have a lot of minis to paint, and I've invited you to join me on this journey to slay this splendid stockpile of small-scale stuff, but I'd still love for each project to be meaningful and personal. I'd like to share with you the reason why I'm painting what I'm painting. For me, my first mini had to be Spawn. He's such an incredible character to me, and has a truly iconic image. So how should I paint him? He had to be dark, yet eye-catching. I couldn't have him fading into the darkness like his comic book counterpart. I am a huge fan of the black suit, but I felt it would be too dark, and all the sculpted muscle detail would be lost. After taking the time to do some research, it hit me. I could use Greg Capullo's cover for the second collected edition as a reference. He still looks like Spawn, but he has a really cool blue tint to his suit, which really helps him stand out in all the wildness of the scene fighting the Redeemer. To break up the shadows on the cape and the dark blue costume, I decided to use a deep purple colour, which hopefully keeps the 2 textures from bleeding into one another. Well, I like it anyway. The last thing I wanted to talk about is the base. I had absolutely no intention of doing anything special with it, but I pretty much accidentally ended up putting him in one of his famous alleyways. Fallen bricks and the discarded Spawn issue 32 set the scene. Oh, and that thing I used for the comic book? It was an old pouch pack from a Space Marine. More specifically, the wrong side of said pouch. I painted it freehand using the cover of issue 32 as a reference. It's not only eye-catching as a cover, but it also represents the end of one era of Spawn and the beginning of a new one. And here he is, in all his finished glory. I had such a blast painting the Spawn miniature, and reliving his history has been incredibly fun. The mini is very cool and printed nicely, so I thought I'd reach out to Dwarf Workshop, who I bought it from. Hello Dwarf Workshop, would you like to introduce yourselves and your company for us?
Hello there, my name is Maxim and I'm the founder, as well as the artist, of Dwarf Workshop. Since childhood I had a desire to make my own miniatures and paint large figures also, but at that time it was quite difficult for me to do something out of it. But with the advent of affordable 3D printing, I realised that the dream can be realised.
I came across your minis a while ago and was pleasantly surprised by the variety of different sculpts you have. What is it that inspires you, and how do you choose what you want to sculpt/sell?
Basically, I choose ready-made models of various characters that I like externally or their history. I don't know much about everyone, but I know they're cool. I also want to do something that others do not have, but such things are not always in demand. For example, some old games or comics that have not become popular enough. Sometimes we made unique figures for fans of such things, which is quite cool. I'd like to do this more often, but in such cases you have to turn to sculptors, and their services are not the cheapest.
Who is the sculptor for this particular miniature, and what relation do they have with Dwarf Workshop? Are they part of DW, or are they freelance?
The sculptor of this Spawn model is Brandon Gash. He has other cool models. He's nothing to do with us. This model was found by one of our regular customers, after which we bought it and began to print.
Is this miniature still for sale? If so, where would people be able to get their hands on it?
Yes, we still print and sell these miniatures like everything else. But since we're from Russia, because of the sanctions, our regular stores, eBay, Etsy, are blocked, and our website does have problems. We're currently using the platform for payment, boosty.to, and for ordering, you can write to our email.
Let's go back to talking about Dwarf Workshop. Do you have a favourite miniature from your collection?
Yes, in fact, I really like our line of figures and miniatures based on Resident Evil. The most favourite model, probably Lady Dimitris.
Is there anything you're currently working on that you can share with us, or is it all a big secret?
Now, unfortunately, we do not have enough resources to develop our own unique models, although there were many plans. Ninja Turtles, even more Resident Evil, and Mortal Kombat, but now it's not clear when we'll be able to do something about it.
Are there any interesting stories that you'd like to share that are either hobby related or about Dwarf Workshop?
I don't even know. I turned my hobby into my business, and now I don't have much time for the games themselves, both computer and desktop, but I like what I do. That's so that I won't remember any interesting cases now. But at the beginning of the work, it was very exciting to send something to different countries, especially to which they have never sent a parcel with figurines. It's also very interesting to meet and communicate with different people from all over the world, with buyers, sculptors, and here we met you. In general, in the process of such work, I acquired various skills and so on. This is the general answer turned out. I can only say that sometimes the wishes of customers are quite strange.
Before I let you go, is there anything else you'd like to say to the viewers?
I want to thank you and your viewers for this opportunity. I've never been invited to an interview, and this is a very interesting experience. I think I can say something like, if you have a dream, then work and it will come true. I want to wish everyone success in creativity and everything else, as well as health. Well, to survive these difficult times. Thanks!
Thank you for your time, and I wish you all the luck with your business. If you'd like to support the sculptor and the people who made it, please check out the description for information and links. And so, with all that said, thank you for your time. I wish you a good day and many more besides. Yours, forever in horror, 226.